Hi, y'all. My name is Jenna Blair Soroka. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a licensed health and nutrition counselor and mindset specialist. I help women nurture a more positive relationship with food and their bodies by using a weight neutral approach and focusing on cultivating habits and behavior changes that allow you to go from the relentless pursuit of the thin ideal and food obsession to embracing your imperfections and beating self-sabotage. It's time for you to reclaim your health and wellness through the power of curiosity, compassion, and courage, and find worth beyond measurement. So, today's interview topic is Feel, Trust, Move, Nourishing Your Body Through Movement and Self-Acceptance with Taylor Fultz. I'm so excited for Taylor to be here. I'm just going to introduce her and then we'll dive right into the interview. So Taylor is a certified health coach, personal trainer, and yoga teacher who teaches women how to nourish themselves inside and out and feel amazing in their bodies. She believes wellness is not about how much we weigh or how we look. It is about how we feel. It is her mission to bring inclusivity, diversity, self-trust, and a shit ton of self-love to the wellness space by educating women about the connection between their body and their mind and empowering them to take their health into their own hands. I just love that so much. Thank you so much for being here, Taylor.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. Okay, so just to start things off, actually, I was thinking before this call how long we've known each other, and it's been it's almost 8 months. Did we start that business program in October or something?
We did. It feels like much longer than that, though. I was going to say at least a year, but it hasn't been a year yet.
I know. I feel like just meeting you and being able to grow in our businesses as health and wellness leaders has been really cool, because what we do is outside of that diet culture mentality, which a lot of people aren't used to. And so you're, like you said, and I read in your bio, it's not about how much we weigh, how much we look, it's about how we feel, which I just love.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think we put too much pressure on ourselves to look a certain way and to weigh a certain amount. And it certainly doesn't come from within. It's very much a beauty standard, within the culture. So yeah, I don't know. It's something that we sort of internalize. And I think the work that we do and that you do is super important to help women kind of break free of that idea.
Yeah, love it so much. I'm already giddy, we haven't even gotten to the interview. I'm like, yes, let's do this.
I know. I love talking about this.
So I figure we can begin with the concept of self-love and self-acceptance, and
hmm
how those two things have played a major role in your path to creating a meaningful and fulfilling life for yourself.
Okay, well, you broke up a tiny little bit, so I'm going to paraphrase and make sure I answer the right
Yeah.
question. So, how have self-care and self-love played a role in my life and transformation, right?
Yep, and
Okay.
self-acceptance, all those things.
Yeah, so great question. And they have been huge for me. So, just to give you a little bit of background, came from an alcoholic father, divorced home. And I started drinking when I was 15, dropped out of college the second year I was there. And at 32, had to move back in with my dad and spend the summer there just because I was in a horrible relationship, had moved to New York City with no um, uh, security net, no money, like just my whole life was a mess. And I think that was the catalyst to say that I needed to make some changes. I'm almost 36 now, by the way. So being that old and being at your dad's house in your old room is one of those things that makes you look at your life and say, okay, what have I done to get here and how did I get here? So that's where self-love really came in and self-acceptance, because what I realized was that the reason I was in that place and that I was numbing and just trying to be outside of my body all the time was because I didn't love who I was, nor did I know who I was at that point. I was just sort of going through the motions. And I never believed that I could have better. It was kind of always like, I have terrible credit and I'll never, like, I never believed I could have better. I saw big houses and thought that's for everyone else, not for me. So that's literally step number one, is believing that you deserve all of the good things. So they played a huge role in my transformation and healing and becoming the person that I am today. If I didn't love myself, I wouldn't believe that I was worth any of it. And accepting who you are too is really important, because again, there's so much pressure to be something more. And now you're this age, so you need to be doing this, or you need to look this way. And if we are okay with where we are and who we are, then we're able to really build a bond with ourselves and love ourselves enough that we want really good things for ourselves.
Yeah, you brought up like a good point with there's a lot of expectations of who we should be, and
Mhm.
like this is how our life should look like at this point, and we can always plan for things, but life rarely kind of turns out that way. And having
Yeah.
the tools in your toolbox to practice self-love and self-acceptance and self-care have obviously for you been really powerful to navigate all of life's ups and downs and whatever was thrown at you.
Yeah. And that's a really good point you bring up too, is tools. That was the first thing I built that summer. Was one of my mentors called it a toolbox. So like I got sober that summer and started working through anxiety and self-worth. And I just built a toolbox of like walks, meditation, like just eating well. So just really small stuff. But it's like you need to have that box to like pick things from time to time.
Yeah. And also you mentioned you started small. It was very like basic and small,
Mhm.
yet that's how you built this foundation to grow upon, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, because I think another big part of like when we make life changes or want to start a new diet or reach a new health goal, we think we have to do this big chunk. And if we want to start working out, it has to be every single day for an hour at a time. And then it's overwhelming and we don't want to do it. So it's like if you can just build on those little things and celebrate the little wins, then you're more motivated to keep doing things. And I've heard it said a few times, but I don't know by whom. So maybe you know who it says it, but it's the little things that we do every single day that make up like our habits and who we actually are. So if you can just get to doing the little things at a time, I think it's more sustainable long term and easier to incorporate into your life.
Yeah. I don't know who that's by. I like in my mind it went to James Clear.
Mm,
Um
I
but
have no clue.
yeah, and then it was like Albert Einstein but I'm like, no, I don't think so. I feel like he said something, but I don't think so anymore.
Yeah, maybe. And I think I butchered it a little bit too, but the idea is there and like
Yeah,
it works for me. So I'm going to just go with it.
just roll with it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I love that. So it kind of, I want to segue into another question, and I want to do that. I have one of your posts on Instagram pulled up right now, which I love.
Okay.
And you wrote, if you're not fixing your own bullshit, your life won't be changing anytime soon.
Yep. Sounds like me.
And I love that. And something I read, maybe it was in one of your posts also, and you've talked about, is radical responsibility.
Hmm.
And there's kind of a couple questions that I want to ask you regarding that.
Okay.
Number one, how would you define radical responsibility for those who might not really understand what that is?
Yeah.
And secondly, how did incorporating radical responsibility into your life, tied with your meditation practice, begin to shift things where you were no longer acting as the characters in your own story, but actually being the author?
Yeah, I love that question. And radical responsibility is one of my favorite topics. So radical responsibility to me is we all know what responsibility is. You take responsibility for your dog or your child or your house. You take care of it. You're the one in charge of it. Radical responsibility to me comes in when you are taking full acceptance and responsibility for everything in front of you. So for me, that means my whole life. And that includes how I came out of the childhood that I spoke about, experiences I got into, my drinking problem, my self-worth problems, the jobs that I've lost in the past, really taking full responsibility for every single thing in your life. Because I believe while we can't control everything that happens to us, we can control every single reaction we have to everything that happens to us. So radical responsibility is really that whole picture of taking responsibility for all of it and understanding that we have a role to play, a huge role to play in what happens to us. And that's a hard pill to swallow. For me, I spent most of my life up until that summer blaming everything else, sort of having a victim mindset. Like I came from this hard background. My dad was an alcoholic, so I never had a chance to not be. If I lost a job, it wasn't because I did a shitty job. It was because somebody, didn't like me, or just those are some small examples. So it's a hard thing to do, to say that was actually my fault and I had a role to play in that. And so that's really important when making changes. And it really helped in my growth and meditation practice, because I would say they more so go hand in hand than one being responsible for the other. So when you meditate, it slows down your mind, and the reason it's uncomfortable is because you don't have anything to distract you from the thoughts in your head. And so the thoughts that can come up can be like, man, now I'm 32 and I live with my dad, and like, it's my fault. And those are hard things for us to deal with, right? So they go hand in hand. Like you have to have those moments of quiet to hear those things. And then you have to have the responsibility of knowing that you're responsible for it and that you're in control of it. So it's actually good news, because you get to decide what happens from there and you can change it. So when you're meditating, then you have this quiet in your mind where, one, you see the problem, you know who's responsible for it, you know what needs to be changed, and then you can start to make the changes. So it's just this whole picture, and they 100% go hand in hand. But I think a great starting place is just meditating, and that can even mean just sitting in silence for a few minutes every day. But it's tough stuff to do, but it's worth it.
Yeah. And you brought up such a good point regarding meditation, because often I hear in my practice with clients, it's like there's some hesitation with meditation.
Mm-hmm.
It rhymes. Alliteration. Because I think there's this idea that meditation is no thoughts, or like if I can't achieve like this silence, then there's something wrong with me. So then we avoid doing that, and it becomes hard. But you brought up how it's not about being silent, it's just about being still, right?
Yes, that's exactly it. You put it into words perfectly. It's really just about sitting with it. So that's what turned me off of it for years too, was that I thought I had to be completely still and completely silent in my head. And if I would shut my eyes, I couldn't do it. So I was like, well, obviously it's not for me. And then I had a mentor that summer that was like, it doesn't matter. You can sit down for 2 minutes and just sit. Like the whole point is to sit, because our brains are constantly firing thoughts, and that's totally normal. It's how we make sense of the world around us. But those thoughts are just passing through, like they're visitors. So if you can sit and if we can observe those thoughts and let them pass, then the ones that are useless to us, we can actually just watch them pass instead of getting them stuck in there and having to process through. Just let it move on and see what's there, because what you'll find is if you have a regular meditation practice, that the same things start to come up. Like you'll see patterns and then you're like, oh, that's what I need to work on, or like that's what I need to focus on this year. That's what's actually really bothering me under all of this.
Mm.
So it just, yeah, allows you to sit with exactly what is. And if your mind is racing, like that's fine. A lot of people's do. Mine still does. Like 60% of the time I meditate. I'm just thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think you broke that down really nicely, because it's gonna, if people watching this have been kind of like wanting to get into meditation but are
Hmm.
have any reservations, you've kind of broken that down and invited people to have compassion towards themselves, that it is a practice, and right off the bat you're not going to be like, I'm this like zen person, and you've been doing it for many years. Right? So
Yeah, now I have, yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's a good point too. It's about having compassion for yourself. And that goes back to self-acceptance and self-love, and like trusting that even if you did meditate today and all you did was think about something you're stressed out about, it's like having that compassion to be like, okay, well, that's okay. That's what came up today.
Hmm.
Let's see what happens tomorrow. And on that note, I think we're going to talk about this later, but I do have a free meditation challenge that anyone's welcome to join. It's 5 days to help you get started. And it's literally what we're talking about right now. It just goes through like that you don't have to be quiet and you don't have to be completely still. And it gives you neat little meditations for each day. So that's a great place to start too if you've been thinking about meditating.
Yeah, and going back to like building your toolbox, this would be
Yeah.
a great tool for your toolbox.
Yeah, it's such a good tool.
Yeah.
Meditation in general is like, should be in all the toolboxes, and everybody's different, right? So maybe it doesn't resonate with you to use it every day or all the time, but it's something that you have. If you have a particularly stressful day, maybe you come back to it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know I was on this kick of using Headspace, and it took me so long. And for those who don't know, it's a meditation app. And it took me long to like get into that, because again, I was under this idea that meditation had to be this, like, I didn't want to sit in discomfort, essentially, right? We don't want to
Yeah.
sit in discomfort. But then once I did it, and I did it daily, and I lowered the expectation, like I just did it for 3 minutes or 1 minute each day. When I
Yes.
stopped
Perfect.
doing it, I was able to see how much I had learned about myself, and giving myself even that brief moment in a day was so kind to myself and allowed me to show up more fully for myself and others. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Did you feel any shift or any difference when you were doing the meditations?
Yeah, it's like I feel I was practicing a lot of self-acceptance, and because
Hmm.
being in a constant, like sitting with discomfort, like intentionally, that's the thing. Like I think a lot of us sit with discomfort unintentionally, and then
Yeah.
that ties into being the victim a lot more. But if we can choose to be in discomfort, then we know how to navigate through discomfort. And so for me, that looked like being okay with um, not being perfect at things, and not having the answers all the time, and just kind of being. So yeah, it was really.
Yeah. I love that thought too of choosing the discomfort, because that's when we get to grow then, and we like being in control of things as humans. So it's almost like a hack
Yeah,
to get ourselves to be okay with it. Like, well, I'm choosing this, so it's fine.
yeah, it's just like yeah, it kind of ties into back into that quote. I just want to get back up when you're like, what was it? If you're not fixing your own bullshit, your life won't be changing anytime soon. It's like you gotta dive in, you gotta go deep.
Yeah, you have to do the work, and that's the hard part. But there are so many layers to that and things you have to uncover first. But yeah, we do have to be in charge of our own bullshit, unfortunately. And I had a lot of it.
Yeah, and which is why like coaches like you, like me, and also reaching out to like building a network and a team around you with like if you're able to get support with a therapist, like those are all really kind things one can do for themselves to help facilitate this unpacking of the bullshit.
Yes, that's a good point too. Like, and therapy has been so helpful. Again, maybe doesn't resonate with everyone, but like it's a tool you might want to throw in your toolbox, and it all circles back to that self-love and self-care, because if you don't think that you're worthy of those things, then you're not going to even build a toolbox, and you're not going to put shit in there. So it's just interesting how it all goes together. And it's really just about loving ourselves a lot. And I don't know why that's so difficult, but it is constant work.
Yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, I'm just like, we can go off on so many tangents in this conversation. I'm just like, reel it back in.
I know, I could do this all day.
Right? Oh, okay. So, one last question I have for you, and we kind of touched on it. So I'm gonna prompt you in a different direction. You might go this way anyway, but what benefits have you and your clients experienced from adding a yoga practice or some sort of gentle, mindful movement into your routine? And as my little prompt, we talked about this before we kind of recorded regarding trauma, because I think that's an important conversation to have when people to understand trauma and different forms of healing like yoga.
Absolutely. That's a great question. So I think it's important to start with trauma, like what we even mean by that. Most people know what we mean by trauma, but what I think people don't understand, and maybe women were programmed not to see things as trauma, little things like I was made fun of in high school by boys who didn't think I was pretty enough. Like, that's trauma at a young age. Like, hearing those things and not knowing how to process it and not knowing what is real and what's not yet, that's trauma. So it could be anything from like huge traumatic life events to words that hurt you to alcoholic parents, like any sort of trauma, like losing a job, losing a family member, like any of that is trauma. And we have to process that. And one thing that I've learned over the past few years, and there's a really great book on it, by the way, called The Body Keeps the Score. Definitely like a powerful thing to get your hands on. But we actually hold trauma in our bodies. And trauma, actually, to sum it up in a really simple way, is trauma is whatever feels like trauma to you. So it could be anything at all. If it felt like trauma to you, it was. And so like your body holds on to that. Same with stress. Literally will hold it in the tissues in your body, and it stays in there. It could stay in there for years, for a lifetime. And it can actually, there's a thing called generational trauma. Like, it can be passed down in your DNA. So like, it is scientifically proven it stays in your body. So one way to get that out is to move, which is why I love to look at exercise through that lens rather than, and I know that you're the same way, rather than I want to exercise to lose weight or look a certain way. Movement is super important to process trauma, stress, and anxiety out of your body. Also, it is good for you. Not to mention the endorphins it puts into your blood so you feel good. But yeah, like starting to process trauma and stress in that way can be really, really useful. And it's a good first place to start, specifically if you don't feel like sitting still and meditating is for you. For years before I started meditating, I started doing yoga. That was where I truly like planted the seed of the transformation that was to come a few years later for me, was when I started yoga, because I couldn't sit still yet, but I knew that when I did yoga and I slowed down my breathing and concentrated just on my body for that hour, that I felt much better. And then I slowly learned that if I was really anxious, because I also struggle with anxiety, I could just go for a walk. And then I could actually feel the anxiety like coming out of my body, like processing through. And the clients I've worked with that have incorporated yoga and meditation into their sort of daily or even weekly practice have really found that they're able to release a lot of stress and anxiety. And a big thing that happens too is you find space between whatever is happening in life, so whatever the stimulus is, and your reaction to it. So generally when something happens and we like rapid fire respond, then it's not always the response that we want or should have. But when you have a moment to step back and process it, then your response is generally better. So it gives you that space too, to like take that deep breath or take a step back and process what's happening before you do a rapid fire response that you might regret later. So there's just, yeah, I could go on and on about the benefits of it, but I just think processing through trauma and stress is like one of the biggest things that you can get from movement, specifically yoga, but really anything that moves your body can like process it out of your tissues.
Yeah, I love that explanation. And I think with the culture of how we're supposed to achieve health and wellness, and how that's really closely tied, at least in Western culture, to weight loss, I think many people miss those benefits because we come up against a wall before we even get into those healing properties of movement, and we say like, oh, I'm not seeing the results I want, I'm not losing weight, so I'm going to stop this, I've failed. And yet we're missing all those benefits that you just mentioned, which are really, when we get deep into why somebody wants to lose weight or wants to achieve some sort of health goal, it's usually not about weight at all.
Yeah, that's a great point. And when starting to work with clients, it's always, you always ask that question of what's your goal, but then it's the why. And like I worked with a coach who she called it the 7 layers of why. And it was like, why do you want it? And then whatever I said, she would just say why. And then whatever I said, why, until at the end of it, I was like screaming this answer that was different than what I even thought. I was like, oh, that's why.
Yeah. And then you realize, you're like, well, then restriction and over exercising aren't really a part of how I achieve that 7-layer deep why in the end.
Yeah. And the why too, when you ask the why like that, is like your first answer to the why, and maybe even second or third, might be the I want to lose weight, I want to look a certain way. But then when you go deeper, it's like, I just want to feel good at the beach. Like, I don't want to be embarrassed to put on a bathing suit. And so the answer to that isn't necessarily losing a specific number of pounds. It's finding a healthy weight for you and then working through the self-love and acceptance of what your body looks like, and saying like, fuck you to any other standards that are like, you need to look like this model, because that's like one body out of 7 billion. So it's just, the root of it generally isn't, I just want to lose weight. Like you said, there's usually another layer.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm so glad we got into that kind of conversation. I think it's important for people to hear, at least as a seed that's being planted, right? We don't need to act upon anything that like we're hearing today. And I think that's a part of self-compassion, self-love, is to allow yourself to hear things and just give yourself time to process it through movement like yoga, or through meditation, like going on a walk or sitting, right? Like all of these different ways to go about it. So with all that being said, first off, love this conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. And secondly, where can people find you, learn more about what you do, and potentially work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. The best place to find me right now is on Instagram, and it's taylorful_life, TAYLORFUL, and then _life. So the Instagram page has a ton of free resources on it, free coaching. The link to the meditation challenge is there. So it's completely free. All you do is enter your email address and I'll send you all 5 days of the challenge. And the website is going through a full rebrand right now, but if you happen to pop onto there through the Instagram link, there are several blog posts there on movement and nutrition and mindset. So if you find yourself on there, there's just a lot of free information on both of those sites, but Instagram is the best place to start, and I'm on there every single day and I don't feel bad about it.
I love your posts. They're so good and they really make you think. So I'm gonna leave that information in the description of the video when I post this. Also,
Beautiful.
yeah, also, what was the book that you mentioned just a bit earlier? Was it regarding trauma or?
Yeah, so it's called The Body Keeps the Score, and I can't remember who wrote it, but that's the name of it. And it talks through how trauma lives inside of your body, inside the cells and tissues in your body, and how to work through that. And it's actually the science behind it too, so you get like way more background on it and how it actually works. And that's a really good place to start, specifically if you've experienced any sort of trauma in your life. It's a really highly recommended book for that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I'm gonna put that in the description also that people can check out, and I'll definitely
Awesome.
check out. So, I'd also love to know, for those of you who are watching, what your biggest takeaway from this conversation was. So leave a comment below. Feel free to reach out to Taylor or me. I'm letting us know what you thought, if this resonated with you. If you have any questions, you will have Taylor's information. You can always reach out to her. And lastly, make sure to also get on my mailing list to know about upcoming interviews like these, events, and receive additional resources to help you nurture your body through curiosity, compassion, courage, so you too can find worth beyond measurement. So thank you again, Taylor, for being here.
Thank you. I really loved it.
Yes, I had such a good time, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye.